Man, another wonderful day for day traders. We had so much volatility. Honestly, I did not expect the upside that we're seeing right now. But hey, as soon as the market thinks that Trump is going to lay back on these tariff talks and that kind of stuff, we just straight up with no looking back. Funny enough, I actually did have a short side bias today. I did think we were going to pull back a little bit before we continued up. So the first live trade that I'm going to go over is actually a short. Typically, I would have been looking for a long around this area because we started to bounce in that previous zone of resistance. But looking at the higher time frames, and right now I'm using the 45,000 tick and the 15,000 tick, it just looked very bearish, and the sellers were actually starting to step in, as well as we had that high volume node. And if you've ever traded Nasdaq before, you know that it moves a lot back and forth. So actually, that long would have played out, and you would have hit like 20 points right there almost immediately. But then you see the sellers really start to come back in. And that's when I was very interested in taking this short to see if I could hit some of these volume nodes below as a target. Now, if you're unfamiliar with volume profile, it's just a different way to look at volume. Basically, instead of seeing all the volume that happened within a specific time frame, the volume profile shows you the amount of volume that happened at a specific price level. In general, the way I use volume profile is to find targets. So if there is a high volume node above, I expect a lot more participation from the sellers to be in that area. And if there's a higher volume node below, I expect a lot of buyers to be in that area. And in general, this gives me pretty good points of where I expect the market to bounce from or reject from. As you can see, this was not a perfect trade. It does bounce around. It hits my target there. So I locked in $910 on just trading one NASDAQ contract on one account, but it does bounce a little bit in this area and then continue to go lower with the apex trailing drawdown on these newer accounts. I was just trying to lock in on the initial flush. I don't want to risk having that distance to drawdown be significantly lower. And as you can see, I make my trailing stops pretty tight once I start to get to that point where my initial target was, just to make sure I do lock in that profit and we don't get a bounce, because NASDAQ can bounce, especially right now, 50 points to 100 points in as little as a minute. Now, if you were someone that got caught in a long on this flush here, this is kind of something that I personally look at to kind of give me an idea of if I should expect a long or a short bias. And basically, as you can see, all these top wicks over here that are paired with the high volume node that I had mentioned before kind of gives me an idea that it's going to be hard for the buyers to at least initially go right through this level, because previously sellers were able to hold this down. Now, obviously, this does not happen every time. There are times where the market is so strong, the buyers just push directly through, but this is a common thing that I've seen lately, and using the volume profile to kind of find these levels has dramatically increased my win rate. And as you can see, we had like a 20-30 point bounce right there from another huge volume profile node where we would anticipate buyers to be kind of waiting to get back in the market. And if you're not using volume profile, you're not going to see that data where it could have been a potential bounce. And a lot of people probably chased that short down there, not looking at the levels over here to the left where there was some previous wicks, and then got immediately stopped out because it went, 30, 40 points almost, in 1 minute right against them. And another thing to note, and that's definitely helped me out a lot too, is notice like these trades are happening at 10:20, 10:30, a little bit later in the day, not right off the open. We did have some news, like some minor news at 10 a.m. So I expected the market to potentially wait for that to get figured out. And a lot of times, if we do have news at 9:45 or 10 or 10:30, the market will just kind of battle back and forth and not really pick a direction because it's waiting for that news to come out. So a lot of times I'll just kind of wait in the morning, see if any levels stick out and see where the volume profile nodes develop. And then once I kind of get an overall kind of game plan of like what I'm seeing and what I think is setting up, that's when I'll go and execute the trades. And I'm actually curious for anyone that like actually tracks their stats or has any kind of performance data, what times of the market are you the most profitable? I'm very curious. I think mine is between 10 and 11 a.m. Eastern time. So I wonder if that's like similar or if a lot of you guys are seeing success in other time frames. And I will say, one more thing that I saw, and I think Vincent, the options insider, he has like profited quite a bit from it, is like the end of day rallies. Like if SPX or SPY gets above VWAP, a lot of times it'll just push the last like hour or 30 minutes of the day. And especially on like zero DT options, you can make some really good money. So it's definitely worth looking into that as well. With that being said, let's hop into trade two. As you can see, once again, we are under the 9 EMA and we are under a higher level volume profile node. So I have my stop set at the high of this current candle. Generally, I have found, especially on the 2000 tick chart, that the high of the candle is actually a really good place to stop out, because if it does break that, it is likely to bounce another 10 or 30 points, depending on how strong the move is. But as soon as a trade starts working in my direction, as mentioned previously, I do always trail just to make sure I am locking in that profit and keeping that distance to drawdown as good as possible. One downside with how quickly I move my trailing drawdown down is the fact that a lot of times I'll get stopped out before it fully makes the move. But the pro to that is I never get reversed on. Like if I'm 20 points in the profit, I will never ever lose money on that trade. At the very minimum, I'll be a stop loss right before break even. Now, the only caveat with that is the two accounts that I have a large buffer on, I will give a lot more room. So I'll have the stop at like break even, but I will actually try to let the trade work all the way down to where I think my profit target should be. And this is because I'm trying to grow those accounts and they no longer have that trailing stop, because the static drawdown is 50,100 in a 50K account after you get past that 52,600 level. And this is similar to how like take profit is, and then a lot of the other like prop firms use like an end of day drawdown, which is pretty nice. But yeah, once you get past the buffer, you don't really have to worry about it. And I like being able to have, up to 20 accounts with Apex. So that's kind of why I'm working with them again. And Apex is typically what I recommend like all new traders kind of start out with, just because it's low price to entry and it kind of gets you a way into the market while like being able to learn and keeping costs pretty small. But at the end of the day, you should have a long-term goal of having your own personal account. And on to the very last trade I'm going to cover in this video. As you can see, I took a long with my stop below the low of that candle. It immediately started pushing toward my profit target, which also was another high volume node, as well as the 9 EMA, because even in a downtrend, price likes to go up and touch the 9 EMA and then continue down. And once again, trailing my stop, putting it below the low of the current candle and just trying to allow it to trail as it continues to rack up profit. And yet again, another perfect example of how Nasdaq almost goes immediately to that level where that high volume node is and then starts to reject a bit as sellers start to come back in. I pretty much do this throughout the day individually in a lot of my accounts. I will try to take one copy trade of like an A+ setup across all my accounts, and then I'll like to go in each individually and take some trades and just kind of like continue to add on some profits individually. But yeah, those are examples of my trades, what I look for, and how I use volume profile. On my charts, I always have the 9 EMA, the 21 EMA, and the 50 EMA, as well as VWAP. And I have found a lot of success recently using tick charts over what I previously used, which was like the 5, 15-minute, and 30-minute charts. So yeah, I used a new mic today, so let me know what you guys think. I'm also debating on getting a camera and kind of adding that into the whole workflow. Hope you guys had a great week. Let me know what you think is going to happen over the next couple weeks. Did we put in a bottom and are we getting out of the bear market, or is this just a bear market rally? I guess we will see.